Our guest today is the mayor of Milwaukie and running for the seat of Oregon House District 41 at the state government level. He has also worked for a number of well-respected institutions as a photographer, having been on assignment for National Geographic, Sports Illustrated, and many others. He is the kind of politician you hope for, rooting for change with all of his heart and dedicating his time in a real effort to make the world a better place. His primary focus, and the reason he left photography for local government, is his desire to implement policy that will slow climate change. I had a wonderful time talking to this man. Here is my friend, Mark Gamba. Well, Mark.
Yes.
You are mayor of Milwaukie.
I am.
Correct? How is that going?
Generally speaking, well.
Yeah?
Being a mayor is kind of a mixed bag always. But the general trajectory for the last 7 years has been good.
So 7 years you've been in office.
Yep.
Okay. And is there a defined term limit?
Yes, 2 terms.
2 terms.
So my second term will be up in January.
Okay. So they're 4-year terms.
Yep.
Okay. And it's like a regular election. You run, you get elected by the people, you get that for 4 years, then you have to rerun again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
So do you have aspirations to go beyond that when your term ends in January?
I am actually currently running for the Oregon House.
Okay.
So my state rep, Karn Power, stepped down in protest for a bill that didn't get passed. And she didn't let anybody know she was doing that until like a week before the filing deadline. But so I'm running for that seat.
That seems fairly uncommon to just step down over one bill.
It is fairly uncommon, but 3 women did it simultaneously.
What was the bill about?
Pay equity.
Okay.
So I don't know if you know this, but the Oregon legislature, well, most elected officials in Oregon are not paid or are not paid anything like what anybody thinks they're getting paid.
Yeah.
The legislature's getting paid, I think, around $33,000 a year. And it's a full-time job. You know, people say, well, it's only 3 months or it's only this or that, right? If you're working, writing the bills, working with your constituents, learning the problems, everything's complicated this day, right? So it's a full-time gig for sure. And they're expected to, well, the theory is that you're a citizen legislator, right? So you have your whatever job you have, you do that job, and then you spend a few months a year as in session. It's a crazy concept that dates back to literally when there are the same number of people in Oregon as there are in Tigard, and it doesn't make any sense anymore.
So you're saying there should be more representatives?
No, not that there should be more representatives necessarily, although that wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea. They should be paid for their time, because the end result of that, and this is why it's by design, the end result of that is that mostly the people that can afford to do that are old, rich, white men.
Okay.
Because you have to be, self-sufficient in order to not work.
Okay.
And so those 3 women all have kids. Daycare costs. I mean, Karn was paying pretty close to her whole salary on daycare.
Yeah, that's the difficult part about if you're in a 2-income family household. I mean, that's typically why one person, usually the man, will go to work and then the woman stays home with the kids, because there's a lot of jobs.
Oh, 40 years ago that was true.
No, I'm saying that used to be the case.
Yeah.
And it still is the case sometimes now, because if you don't exceed a certain threshold, it doesn't make sense for both people to go to work because you're paying so much money for daycare. But
the other side of that is almost no job pays well enough that one person can work and support a whole family these days.
It's a crazy catch-22, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we either have to increase what people are getting paid to stay up with the cost of predominantly housing, right? Everything's going up, but housing is the real big, that's the elephant in the room.
Yes, for sure.
And, a perfect example, One was a school teacher and one was an attorney for a nonprofit. And they could barely, and this is 10 years ago, afford a house in Milwaukie, barely. And they got a fixer-upper and they worked on it. But now they'd be hard-pressed. And that's a couple with 2 incomes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the world we're in right now. So imagine, somebody who's an Amazon worker and a Starbucks worker or
it's not possible.
Not going to happen.
No, you can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just bought a house in Gresham in September for $405,000. And I was lucky to get it at that amount. All the other houses I put in bids on, people were coming in with 20, 30 grand on top. And I can't compete with that. I could barely afford what I have now. And that house has already increased in value 30 or 40 grand in 6 months.
Oh, yeah.
It's insane. And it's not a $400,000 house. It's like a $250,000 house.
Yeah. A friend of mine lost a bid the other day to somebody that put in an extra $200,000. And we're not talking about $1 million house. We're talking about a $600,000, $700,000 house.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's nuts. And it's, we see all the homeless folks out on the streets and everybody decries that for both sides, right? The people that are just heartbroken at the horrific lives that those people are living and the people that are disgusted by that, right? So I'm hearing them both at the doors because I'm spending a lot of time at the doors these days. And that's a result of what we've been doing in the society for, I don't know, at least since Reagan, probably before that. But this whole concept and structure of our economic system that basically funnels wealth to the top, whatever, 1%, 0.1%, whatever they are. And everybody else is just getting poorer and poorer and poorer. Mm-hmm. And then we wonder why there's this huge division and all this anger and all this frustration and people freaking out about masks. It wasn't about masks. People are just upset. Mm-hmm. They're just, their lives suck.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot easier to make money when you have money.
Yep.
You can reinvest and purchase land and do all kinds of stuff.
Well, and not pay taxes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are definite issues with the tax code, and it's unfortunate, but it's not their fault. They have good lawyers who exploit the system. The system is at fault. You need to rewrite the system because they're not doing anything illegal.
Agreed, except who wrote the bills that became that system?
Legislators that were paid by rich people.
Bingo.
Yes. So how do you fix that?
You stop electing legislators that are millionaires. That's a good start. Stop electing legislators that are deep in the pockets of other millionaires and start electing people like AOC and, Jamie McLeod Skinner right now running against one of Oregon's millionaire congresspeople. Mm-hmm. When we get a plurality of congresspeople that are like that, then we have a shot maybe at beginning to reverse the system. But otherwise, we're just going to continue to see more and more homeless people, more and more division in the country, more and more pain. The average families are going to be more and more uncomfortable.
Well, a lot of it has to do with, I forget what year, but it's only been about 10 years or so when they allowed political action committees to raise as much money as they possibly could without really specifying where it came from, so that you buy elections now. Yep.
Well, there's a classic example, like an unbelievable example happening right now in Oregon in the 6th Congressional District. So that's our new district, the newly drawn district. So there's not an incumbent there. And there were, I don't even know anymore. There were 7 or 8 people running on the Democratic side and another handful on the Republican side. One of the people on the Democratic side, Carrick Flynn, I'm going to name names, sorry.
I asked him to come down and talk to me. Yeah, I didn't get a response.
And big surprise, because the one time he's actually talked to anybody, he said some stuff that are people like, wait, what? This is a guy that's like polling because there's a Bitcoin or whatever, Dogecoin, I don't know what it is, billionaire.
Yep.
who's utterly financing this guy's campaign to the tune of like $7 million, I think $8 million, something like that right now. So there's constant barrage of ads. And I heard 4 on the radio the other day, just driving from point A to point B. This guy has voted exactly twice in Oregon. He hasn't lived in Oregon for years, decades, I think. He grew up here.
He grew up and then he moved away for a long time.
Yeah, he's been in D.C. for a long, long time. So he's come back. He doesn't really have any experience of dealing with Oregon issues because he's been in D.C. for however long. And certainly he's running against people with a lot more credibility politically. And he's going to probably win, but he's got no business winning.
Well, why is that position so important? Because it's a newly created district?
No, just because that's yet another congressperson that will be owned by yet another billionaire. Utterly owned.
Some people would argue that it's different if it's somebody involved with crypto.
Yeah, that remains to be seen. I know that the theory behind crypto is that will cause the sort of democratization of wealth and blah, blah, blah.
It could be a good thing, but there are far too many people in control of our money for them to allow it to happen. So I don't quite know exactly how things are going to turn out, but in theory, it is a wonderful idea to be able to transfer wealth amongst people without dealing with Goldman Sachs or Bank of America or any other middleman that is going to charge you $30 for an overdraft fee. Those institutions are not necessary anymore, and they have a significant stake in making sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and if they see it starting, it becomes inevitable, I guarantee you they'll own it.
Oh, they'll get into it. I guarantee they have interests in various coins, Ether and Bitcoin. I'm sure there are a bunch of banks that are invested in that because they know there's significant benefits to the success of it. And there are a lot of people making a lot of money. But the interesting thing to me is that you have this guy who is running for this new district, and like you've said, as far as we can tell, he's not really talking to anybody. He's just kind of like a face in a bunch of commercials. It'd be cool to hear what he really has to say. I don't know.
Well, he did do one interview recently that has made a splash because it's the only time he's talked to anybody. And he said things like, he has empathy for timber unity, for example. And
Timber unity?
Do you know what that is?
No.
It is a PAC, another political PAC, that is essentially the muscle for the far right in Oregon. It's predominantly funded by a couple of really large timber barons.
Okay.
And so they go after, they look for vulnerable Democrats and prop up a Republican in that seat and go after them. It's about as anti-environmental, anti-anything good that you can imagine because, they're playing on the pain that the folks in the timber industry have over the loss of basically their lifestyle, right? But they aren't them, right? They're the millionaires that benefited for years of their work and then mechanized their jobs, right? So like a typical timber crew back in the day was 14 guys, right? Now it's 2 and a big machine.
Yeah.
And then they offshored all those mill jobs. So all those mills that were in every town, basically grew up around a mill in Oregon. And almost all those mills are gone, and they're all offshore.
Well, this is a recurring issue with every industry.
Sure.
If Americans want cheap products, they get manufactured in other countries because labor is less for the corporation. So what do we do? I mean, if you want to maintain your lifestyle of getting certain products at certain financial levels, those jobs will go away. People need to work. People need stuff to do here. Technology gets better. There are machines that go into the forest and chop down the trees. Like, we have all these people that need something to do, and I don't know what the answer is. What kind of job do you just give somebody when their industry disappears?
Well, there's actually two parts to that. And there's a little bit of a misnomer there, that whole concept of things got offshored because we want cheap products. Huh. They got offshored because there was a bigger profit margin for the billionaires and the millionaires. If you look today, what was that I read a while back? If you buy a Big Mac in the U.S. where somebody's getting paid $12 an hour, $10 an hour to work, it's X. And if you buy it in Copenhagen, where that same person is making $24 an hour, it's only like a quarter more for that Big Mac. So it doesn't, the cost of products are less the issue, and it's more the profit margin for the millionaires. Okay. So that's one of the misnomers. There was something else you said, and I wanted to, dang. Actually, I almost took notes, and I was like, no, I can't write on his contract.
No, I don't care. You write on it. I just see us running into a problem with people need stuff to do. Not everyone's going to be an artist. Not everyone's going to sit around and take pictures or draw on a canvas. Like, people want stuff to do. There are a significant amount of people who want to get up every day and go to work. Even if it's some shitty job that they hate, people like to have purpose. Sure. And that's the issue we're going to run into very soon, is what is your purpose and what do you give to the community? How do you get compensated for your time? There are all these very existential threats that are coming to us because life is not the same. It's not going to be the same way it's been for the last 500 years. No,
everything's changing. I remembered what I was thinking.
Okay, go back to it.
All these products that we've offshored, right? And it's virtually everything. I mean, pick up anything. Oh, yeah, made in China.
Yeah.
Anything that we have virtually is made somewhere else. And a lot of that's in China. And if you talk to the geopolitical whizzes and ask them, what are our biggest threats in the world? They'll say, Russia and China. Think about that.
Yeah.
We got a taste of it during the pandemic, right? All of a sudden, we couldn't get masks. We had a pandemic. People were dying. Doctors were wearing the same PPE for like a week. They're supposed to change it out with every patient. And they were wearing, Why? Because our source of all that stuff was China. And they were locked down. So play that out. Play that out, them deciding at some point to really hammer us. They could just stop the flow of literally everything. Mm-hmm. Everything. So just from a completely, almost a Republican standpoint of protecting the United States, we should not allow the offshoring of every bloody thing that we need in this country. Mm-hmm. There should actually be some kind of system that maintains a lot of that production here.
Well, yeah, it's like what's happening with natural gas in Europe right now, right? Germany, everybody's trying to level sanctions against Russia to try to squash them because they're trying to say the Ukraine invasion is a horrible thing, and it is a horrible thing. But they're trying to stick it to Putin, and the natural gas that flows into Germany, Germany's like, we have to buy it from them. If we don't, then we can't heat the country. So when you are completely reliant upon another country, that's a strong arm they have to guarantee that you're going to keep coming to them.
Yeah.
And I guess you can't produce everything yourself for every single country, but it's weird when you get into these positions. And China is so interesting because they have an immense amount of power over us, even in just like the entertainment industry. You have, I know it happened to LeBron, it happened to John Cena, it's happened to all these major entertainment figures where they make a comment, usually about Taiwan, but they make some comment and China freaks out, and then they have to go back and apologize because the market in China for entertainment and for movies and for buying product from them, it's so immense. Everybody's afraid to piss off China. So it's this weird thing where you really can't stand up for anything at certain positions of power. You can't say, we're done with you, China, because we rely on them for so much. Even just the entertainment industry, even just Hollywood. China is doing horrendous stuff all the time. Nobody can stand up to them.
Yep. No, and I'm sure, it's really easy for us to sit in that position and look at that and feel that and imagine how so many of the other countries in the world feel about us.
Oh, yeah.
It's very similar.
No, it's
has been for decades.
For hundreds of years, I'm sure. Since we came into existence.
Certainly since World War II.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all this weird power struggle. And that's the disappointing part, is that people don't usually realize that we all are interdependent on each other. And we're all just hanging out on the same planet, breathing the same oxygen, trying to raise kids. Like, everybody's really trying to do the same thing. But there's all this weird strife constantly. It's so annoying.
Yeah, and it's typically not caused by us.
No.
Right? It's caused by a handful of the wealth, the kings, right? Mm-hmm. The modern day kings.
For sure.
Are the ones starting the wars and causing the flow of some particular product to not flow somewhere, and strong arm somebody to do something. Yeah. It's the world really hasn't changed that much from that standpoint, that the vast majority of the population has a lot less control over their lives than they would like to think or would hope.
Yeah. Yeah. You think it's gotten worse in the last 50 years?
I think it's cyclic like everything else.
Yeah.
And I think we are at a point right now, particularly in America, but really worldwide, where we're seeing the chickens come home to roost of that sort of the neocon economic model. And it's bumming people out everywhere. At all levels. I'm knocking doors in Eastmoreland. That's one of the tonier neighborhoods in the Portland metro region. There's some very unhappy people.
Yeah.
Yeah. People talk about, I'm moving out. And I'm like, where are you going to go?
Okay. So what is the general consensus? Why are people so pissed in Portland right
now? Two basic issues. One is the houseless issue. There's so many of those folks on the streets. They're very obvious. It's not like, they're being tucked away somewhere mm-hmm. or being kept out of sight so that all the good people can feel comfortable, right? They have to have that in their face every day, that we have a society that's doing that to people.
Yeah. So that's the one reason. What's the other one?
Crime. Yeah. We're seeing, Portland has handled so many things so poorly in the last several years.
And you don't have to name names if you don't want to, but where's the failure at?
It's the same place I got in trouble with the Willamette Week.
Well, you don't have to go there if you don't want to. But
really, and it's not one person's fault. It's Portland's form of government is really bad. It's really bad. There's only one other city in the entire country that still has that form of government.
Okay, so explain that. Elaborate on that. What does it do?
Okay, so I have to draw the comparison to make it clear. In Milwaukie, there's a city council, there's a mayor. They set policy. They say, these are the things we care about. These are the things we want to change, right? But not so much of a how. We do get some interplay on the how when it starts to relate to budget and things like that. But we say, do this, and then the city manager and all of her departments and department leads figure out how to do that, and they do it. And as long as the council stays consistent, they can do it very effectively. What can happen is there can be flip-flopping with elections every 2 years, right? What I set in place when I took office was to do a really powerful visioning process throughout the city, and we wrote a vision, and that vision is literally what the council and then that sort of whole power of the city is moving towards, is creating that vision. So we're all moving in one direction and trying to solve those problems. As opposed to Portland, which elects a city council at large. They're not districts. Milwaukee's not districts either, but we're tiny. A city like the size of Portland, most cities, Chicago, New York, whatever, they have, districts that each councilor is elected from. So Portland doesn't have districts. Everybody's at large. And then, apropos of nothing, each of those city commissioners, they're not councilors, they're commissioners, becomes the head of a department, a specific department. So, for example, Joanne Hardesty right now is the head of PBOT, right? Portland Department of Transportation. She's got some experience in that. She's doing a relatively decent job. But you look back through the past history of Portland and who's been put in places of power, they haven't necessarily walked in with any experience whatsoever in that realm. And they're certainly not elected to do that thing. They're not elected to be the mayor appoints them.
The mayor appoints them. Okay, that's the key.
That's the key. So A, they're not elected, so nobody's judging as they're being elected, is this person going to be a great leader of a Department of Transportation? Is this person going to be a great leader of a water department, right? That's not how it's happening. It's just those get handed out by the mayor. So that's one aspect that's really bad, that the person running a department has doesn't necessarily have any experience doing that. The other part is then they have these little fiefdoms that they're trying to protect. And a lot of issues are very interconnected, right? So houseless is a perfect example, right? Whose problem is that? Well, housing, ostensibly, but if you're then trying to build, say, camps, really cool camps like Eugene has done with their little Conestoga wagons where, you have a place that is safe, you're going to stay out of the weather, you've got bathroom facilities, you've got, shower facilities, trash, it's organized, it's comfortable, and social services knows where to find you, more importantly, so that they can begin to help you. Instead, because this department owns all the vacant land that Portland has, but they have nothing to do with the houseless issue. But this department needs some vacant land to be able to do some of those camps. And it becomes this fight between those two departments. So instead of having a vision that a council is saying, let's do this thing, and then the person who's in charge of that saying, okay, Public Works, I need you to do this. Cops, I need you to do that. And so then we're solving that problem, right? That's not the way Portland works. And it's really become obvious.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, and I could be totally wrong, but it seems like nothing really gets handled in Portland. It seems like there's just ongoing issues, and no one can do anything. It's like there's too many checks and balances.
I don't know if it's checks and balances so much. It's just a lack of coordination. And the part, here I go again. Ted's just going to hate me forever. It is a little bit incumbent on the mayor to set a vision, to set a tone, to set a direction, and to hold to that, right? Even when it's painful. Like even when the thing you logically need to do to solve the problem is going to step on some big business's toes, you have to be able to stick to your guns and do that thing. And that's not so much what happens in Portland.
Yeah. Well, how long is the mayor's term in Portland?
Ted was elected 2 years after me. I can't remember if Portland has term limits or not. I don't actually remember that.
Huh.
So he's been in, this will be the end of his second term, 2 years from now, 2 years from January, and be the end of his second term.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think the bigger issue, way bigger issue, is the form of government. And that Portlanders are going to have an opportunity to change theoretically in November.
Really?
Yeah, there's been a charter review process happening, and that's going to come before the council or become before the voters. So if I'm recalling what I read some time ago correctly, which 50-50 shot here, it does create districts. It says there will be 3 representatives from each district. The mayor is a non-voting person, but the mayor hires the city manager. I think that's where they landed. But don't hold me to that.
Which will be an improvement.
Far superior. Superior. It's, yeah.
What are the other cities in the country that have this same form of government?
There's only one, and it's somewhere in like Louisiana or someplace. Oh, yeah.
Portland's the only major city that has this form of government.
Yes.
And it's just because it's been that way forever and no one changed it?
Pretty much. Yeah. So you look at cities like Chicago, New York, LA, Los Angeles, or LA, San Diego, any other major city. Typically, they're a strong mayor form of government, which means they don't have a city manager per se. The mayor actually hires and fires the directors, department heads, and then sort of runs the city. That's what a strong mayor concept is. Beaverton was a strong mayor for a while. They just changed it back to the city manager form of government, which I think most people would probably say, well, I don't know. For really big cities, strong mayor is not a bad idea. But I think the city manager form of government is certainly superior for anything less than a really big city.
Mm-hmm. Well, why, in your opinion, why continue trying to be the mayor of a city versus go to the state legislature, which is what you're going to do? Why wouldn't you go for mayor of Portland or mayor of Cincinnati or something? Why choose to go to the state government?
Well, because I don't live in Portland or Cincinnati. So, there people have asked me to move to Portland and run for mayor.
Yeah.
I think there's different aspects. Okay, we should start with why I got into politics in the first place.
Let's do it.
Okay. And then remember the question you asked me, because I'm going to have to explain a lot otherwise.
Okay.
I was, as you, we haven't talked about that in the interview yet, but I used to be a photographer.
Yes.
One of my clients for many years was National Geographic. And on assignments for them, as well as assignments for some of the other clients, I was seeing changes take place in the real world, physical changes in the natural world that weren't predicted to occur for at least another 20 years. Like I had read the climate science, right? I'd read the predictions of, we will see glaciers start to melt back at this point. We will see potentially coral reefs start to bleach and die at this point. And I was seeing that 20 years earlier than had been predicted. And that freaked me out because I also am very clear how this plays out. I'm very clear how climate change, if left unaddressed, plays out. And that is very poorly for the human race and most of the rest of the species on the planet. Mm-hmm. So actually it was the 2000 presidential election when the Supreme Court gave the election to Bush over Gore. Mm-hmm. So you had the only presidential candidate that had actually spoken very aggressively in support of doing something about climate change, running against an oil baron, in essence. I mean, that boiling it down, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And the oil baron got put in office. And I went into this tailspin. I mean, personally, my ex-wife will tell you stories. It was, yeah, it was ugly. It was a very dark time for me because I just assumed that America was not so stupid that it would elect George Bush over Al Gore, given everything that was going on.
So that one event was the catalyst for you deciding to get into politics.
Yeah, because as I stewed in that for years, I was just like, I got to do something. And, I'm not a millionaire, so I can't run for president. That's out. So I eventually got on the planning commission in the city because I had talked to the planners and they said, well, we're going to be doing some code that would allow you to cause changes that would have an effect. So I did that. That was still very volunteer time kind of thing. I could still do my job, still, run my business. And then when I saw that good ideas were not being implemented by the city council, I was like, okay, I'm going to run for city council. And so I ran for city council. That ate up more time, and my business started to suffer. And when I realized that being the mayor, even though it's still only one vote on the council, you set the tone, you set the vision. And so 2.5 years later, whatever it was, I ran for mayor. And I've been the mayor for 7 years.
And we talked about money at the start. Is that position a paid position?
$300 a month.
$300 a month? Why even give you anything?
I know.
What does $300 do?
It was set in the charter, I think. And it hasn't changed since. Well, it did just change recently, where they're giving a cost of living increase on that every year. Right?
$310 now.
Yeah, $306.72, or whatever it is. It's pathetic, and virtually every mayor in the state of Oregon is in the same boat.
Yeah, I grew up in the Dalles, and I remember somebody telling me that he doesn't get paid anything.
Yeah, that's very common, but a stipend is the most common, and it's it ranges anything from $60 to, I think there's some cities out there that might be doing 1,000 or something like that, but it's pathetic, and it to do the job well. A lot of people, God, you've done such a great job being mayor. Yeah, I gave up my life to do that.
Yeah,
literally gave up my life, and that's what it takes. So unless you are an old rich white man, right, that can afford to just not do anything to make a living, and you can just concentrate on doing that, and by the way, be doing it for the right reasons, which if you're an old rich white man, is really unlikely.
Yeah, man, you could be golfing.
I know. Well, I could certainly still be doing what I used to do, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Right? Traveling around the world, taking pictures of cool stuff. That was a great job. But I've been really effective. We passed one of the strongest climate action plans in the state. We set that vision that I talked about. We're changing so much about the city. And it's obvious even to people that don't live in the city. I'm knocking doors up in, again, Eastmoreland. I knocked this one door, and this lady had a smile on her face when she answered the door. And I started my little spiel, assuming she didn't have any idea who I know who you are, Mark. I've been following you.
Nice.
I'm voting for you.
Nice.
Can I write you a check? It's literally, that was the conversation. So people are noticing the change in Milwaukie, right? Cool. And a lot of people would like to see that in their cities. And they, I've had like people from 4 or 5 different cities say, please move to my city and be the mayor. But it wasn't because I'm some really special human being. It's because I'm a human being that's paying attention and is willing to put in the work and give up whatever it took to put the time in to do the work.
So if you go to the state, you have the opportunity to make broad changes statewide instead of just within the district of Milwaukie.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you could somehow this might sound stupid, but if you could somehow get involved with the people that meet in Paris for the Paris Climate Agreement, like, is that the ultimate?
I mean, it would be interesting to go, but, and I could have gone this year. There were mayors that went. Those agreements are pretty much worth the paper they're written on.
Yeah.
Unless the countries involved are going to actually live up to them. And you saw, I mean, Trump walked away from the Paris Agreement. So for 4 years, we did nothing. We went backwards. He was undoing things that Obama had done that would have moved us in the right direction. And we certainly don't have a legislature that's concentrating on that, right? Kurt Schrader was one of the congressmen that helped separate the Build Back Better bill from the infrastructure bill. The infrastructure bill has a couple of little dibble-dabbles in climate stuff, but the real meat and potatoes was in the Build Back Better bill. He is heavily fossil fuel funded, right? So it was in his interest, or in his funders' interests, to see those bills get separated so that then Manchin could stop the Build Back Better bill. If they were together, then that's him stopping the infrastructure bill. That's not going to play so well with the voters.
Yeah, there's so many little pet projects that get lumped in with those huge bills, and then when people deny them, they get labeled as denying the core thing. But there's so many other things involved. I wish they would just say, this is the one thing, vote on this. This is the other thing. But that's not how it works. In federal Congress?
They do try and lump a lot of stuff together, and it's all an algorithm, right? Because if they do a bill that's just about
infrastructure,
really, well, infrastructure should be a slam dunk. Infrastructure, rebuilding the road, keeping the roads in good shape.
Yeah,
nobody's going to vote against that. So you don't have to play games with that. But what the Democrats were trying to do was tie the bill that would actually do some climate work to that bill, so that it would force the poor Democrats, the bad Democrats like Schrader and Manchin, to vote for the Build Back Better bill. Didn't work. They got it separated, and now the Build Back Better is not happening. But you're right. In the Build Back Better bill, there was a ton of stuff, and in it, superficially, it doesn't seem related. And I'm sure there were things in there that aren't, right? But again, everything is so complicated and everything is so interrelated these days that when you're trying to solve this problem, if you don't do this, which kind of seems utterly unconnected, an unintended consequence of this one hurts this, right? And what has been happening within the movement, which I think is a good idea, it's the right thing to do. Whether or not it's a feasible political thing to do is a different question. But every other major shift in society, every time society has gone from the horse and buggy to the car, or from the think about those kind of major shifts. Always, people of color and the poor are left behind. They like wherever they were, they're now worse off because of that shift. So what they've been trying to do, the people that I respect in Congress, were trying to say, okay, with this shift that we must make to solve climate change, let's make sure that the people that always get left behind actually aren't for a change. So there's a lot of social issues tied in with the Build Back Better bill for that reason. You could argue, and many do, that climate's the bigger problem. Let's get it solved. And then let's do the social issues. But we've always done that.
Yeah, but climate kills everyone.
It does kill everyone.
So that's pretty big.
Yep.
So
if we could only get the rich people to understand that, because they still think that they're going to be able to live in their little bubble somewhere, their dome with their own hospital and their own farmers and all their own stuff.
They'll have rocket ships to Mars.
Yeah, or that.
They're set.
Yeah.
That's what's so frustrating to me about politics is nothing. It seems like so much more could get done if there weren't all these things happening in the background. It sounds like you go to the grocery store and you are going to buy like a turkey dinner, and then like your kid throws in a pack of gum, and then your other kid throws in like a candy bar. You're like, no, we're not getting that. We're just getting the turkey dinner. Like, let's just do that one thing and we'll worry about the other stuff later. And because all those little things get tied in, then that allows different people to vote for different scenarios. It seems like nothing gets done. I'm
sure that's part of it. I'm not going to, for 5 seconds, defend the way the federal government functions. It is completely dysfunctional. I would say the bigger piece, the bigger problem there is that the majority of the people in Congress, A, are millionaires, and B, are in the pockets of other millionaires and billionaires. Okay. So they're going to do what is beneficial to them.
For sure.
All right. The fossil fuel industry is one of the wealthiest industries ever in humankind. They do not want the changes that we must make in order to save we all used to get to say to save the planet. Mm-hmm. But as George Carlin pointed out, the planet will be fine. The planet will be fine.
Yeah.
It's us that's screwed.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm always trying to think of a pithy way to say it, but to basically save the human race and all the other critters that we share this planet with, the fossil fuel industry is going to have to take a hit, big one.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not willing to do that. And they just don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And so they own most of Congress. They own all the Republicans, and they own enough Democrats that nothing gets done.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line.
It's a good way to keep making money.
70% of Americans believe in climate change, believe we should be doing something about it, but it doesn't happen. 70%-ish believe we should have universal health care like the rest of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Again, doesn't happen. Why? Insurance industry, pharmaceutical industry, hospital industry, a lot of profits there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're still on the standard measurement system. Like, what are we doing?
See, you're not old enough, I don't think, to remember when we were all being trained in both.
Oh, really?
When I was in school, when I was a kid, I'm going to say grade school, we were learning the metric system and the English, no, what do we call it?
Standard?
Standard.
Yeah.
Whatever. Because we were supposed to be transitioning. We were like, within a few years, we were going to switch to metric. I don't know who killed that, but somebody killed it.
America's better.
Oh my God.
I mean, think about it. It's called standard, and then there's the other one. And every other country uses the other one.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Well, to me, I wonder how there's so many large corporations. There's Facebook, Instagram,
Meta actually is.
Meta.
Google.
Google. There are thousands of companies that run everything off the internet. They are capable of running servers in locations, acquiring pictures, acquiring data, doing all kinds of good and nefarious things in the background. They've got it all figured out. But then in this country and a lot of countries, you walk to a booth and you take a piece of paper and you scribble in a box. Why can't we figure out how to use our phone? And then you know what? The federal government says, hey, 300 million people who live in the United States, or 200 million that are of voting age. Why don't you check a box on your phone in the app that says you believe in climate change and you want us to do something about it? Why can't they figure that out?
Oh, they can. It's not an issue. I mean, we can solve climate change. We have all the technology we need right now, every bit of it. It is literally about profits. It's literally about somebody's going to take a hit on the profits. That's all it's about. That's all it's about. That's why they're controlling the voting system still. I mean, Oregon has gone way further than most of the rest of the states, right? You get your ballot in the mail. You have 2 weeks sitting at your kitchen table instead of taking your cheat sheet into that stupid little booth that you were talking about. Now, at least we could go to what Oregon's done, right? At least we could do that.
Well, they freaked out about that in 2020.
You know why? Because people that had never had an opportunity to vote before voted, and they lost.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole system's not good.
Nope.
It's not good. But your goal is to get in there and try to make some changes.
Yep.
And so what can you do to make Oregon's impact stronger against climate change? What do you plan on processing or putting through?
So there's a couple areas that I want to engage in immediately. One of them is to utilize, so our biggest GHG impact is transportation still, all right? A lot of people are pinning the solution to that on electric cars. Not going to happen fast enough. The solution that is working in many places in the world, not in this country, but in the rest of the world, is to say, in this geographic area, from this hour to this hour, if you enter in a car, single occupancy vehicle, you will pay $25 or whatever it is. So London does it, Stockholm does it, Singapore does it, a lot of places. It's called congestion pricing.
It's like a toll?
It's not, it's all, you're not throwing quarters in a booth, right? It's just your smartphone is in your car or whatever, and you go into that and you get dinged.
Okay.
And the smart part of all that is that then they take that money that they make and they put it into mass transit and they put it into bike ped and they put it into ways to get people to where they're going without using a gasoline powered car. So you've got the double dynamic, right? One is you've now priced being in that area in a car. That's now expensive. And you've taken that money and made it so that everybody else who can't afford that $25 can actually get where they need to go on the train, on the bus, on a bike, whatever. I mean, London's doing this really cool thing. They're building this bike highway floating on the Thames because that was the cheapest land they could get, right? And so people are going to be able to get places in London on a bike faster than any other way.
Well, I don't know why you'd want to drive a car in London anyway. That sounds like a nightmare.
It is. It is. It's a nightmare in most cities. I mean, when was the last time you drove in New York City?
Never.
Yeah, I did for 6 years, and I'll tell you, it's insane. But Denver, LA, for God's sakes, I mean, that is a nightmare.
Isn't the argument for LA though that everybody drives in their car anyway, and it's so spread out that there's no way to fix it? Well,
they're spending, what is it, a couple $1 billion putting in a light rail system right now.
Really?
Yeah. So they've figured out that, adding another lane to the 12-lane highway is not going to solve the problem because it just keeps not solving it, right? Yeah. It's called induced demand, right? You have a 4-lane highway, you add 2 lanes, and 6 months later, a year later, it's all full again.
Yeah.
So you haven't solved the congestion problem. You've just allowed that many more cars to congest and pollute. So everyone who's paying attention knows that and knows that we aren't going to solve any of those problems by continuing to widen the freeways. We have to create other ways for people to get around.
So you were in line with creating this zone that costs more to enter during certain hours.
Congestion pricing. Yeah. Honest to God, real. ODOT right now is calling their stupid tolling concept congestion pricing. And they're only doing that because they're not going to charge the tolls when there's not a lot of traffic. They're only going to charge the tolls when there's a lot of traffic. But the problem is with their thing, it's just on the interstate, right? So what are people going to do?
Go on the other roads?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in some places that'll be a pain in the ass. In like West Lynn, that's going to be a nightmare because there's like 2 roads that parallel 205.
Well, it's the same thing that happened with Waze. Waze will send you down other weird roads, and then everybody goes that same route, and then it's like driving on the freeway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything got more, We all love that new technology. I use Google Maps in that ways, but it does the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what else?
So that's one bill that I would like to push, and it's going to be a big deal. The other one is building energy. We haven't touched building energy in this state at all.
What about nuclear?
So you're asking me, do I think nuclear is a solution to climate change?
Yes.
No.
No.
For 2 reasons. Well, large-scale nuclear takes 20, 30 years to come online. So if we said tomorrow, okay, here's $10 billion, go build some nuke plants, too late.
Okay.
By the time we get them up and running, it's too late. There are some interesting things. There's a company called NuScale that's doing these really tiny nuclear reactors. They're much safer. If there is a problem, the problem will be not anything like Chernobyl. Those have potential. They can come online faster. So there is some possibility there. We have the capacity. So just offshore wind energy alone, if we built the offshore wind energy that Oregon has been mapped out to be able to have, we would be making, I'm going to probably screw up the numbers, so don't anybody hold me to this, but I believe it was 3 times the amount of energy that Oregon needs just in the offshore wind potential.
But what does that mean? Like, how many windmills do you have to build?
I don't know.
A lot, probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
But still, it's, when there's an overabundance of wind, it's like, what's the joke? What do you call a spill on for a solar array, a sunny day?
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's like when there's problems, nothing bad happens.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of things like wind, solar, tidal energy, wave energy. Right? You're not building something that has a real downside to it. Nukes have some pretty significant downsides. One is the obvious potential that we saw in Fukushima, that we saw in Chernobyl, which is real and scary, particularly in a place that's supposed to have some really big earthquakes coming up.
Mm-hmm.
But the other piece that people talk about less, but is actually significant, is what do we do with the waste?
Yeah.
We don't have a good solution to that yet.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing all kinds of crazy things with it, but there's no good solution.
Yeah, it seems like the 2 greatest options, and we just haven't figured out how to harness it the right way, is water or sun. You could get enough energy from the sun. What else do you need?
Yeah. And wind is also very good. You can do, because they build those windmills so big,
Mm-hmm.
they produce so much energy with just one windmill. And there's a lot of places that wind blows all the time. I mean, Hood River's entire economy is built on that fact.
Well, yeah, if you drive out 84 and you look up into Washington, they're all over the place. I have a friend that builds them out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we can solve the problem we have with the technology we have today. And all of those technologies are just going to get better, right? Solar panels are going to get more efficient. All that stuff. We just have to say we are not going to invest anymore. And as a matter of fact, we're going to start to shut down the coal plants and the gas plants, and we're going to build more solar and more wind and do it more quickly. But, even PGE will tell you that the most efficient new source of energy is to cause us to use less where we're currently using it, to make things more efficient. So buildings, I started to go there. So our building code in Oregon is controlled by one group of people at the state level. Each city doesn't get to have its own building code. It's odd. The rest of the country doesn't do that. But the home builders managed to push that through back when the Republicans were still in power, I think. So our building code, contrary to what they will tell you, is behind certainly all of the West Coast and many, many other states. It's generally on par with the federal minimum, which is to say that both buildings in Washington and buildings in California are being built to a much higher standard.
And what ways can they do better?
Better insulation. I mean, windows.
Yeah.
I mean, the windows that we're using are crap.
Okay.
It's subtle stuff, and it's not hard, and it's not that expensive. I'll give you an example. There's a affordable housing complex that's built out in Orenco, right there by Orenco Station. It's called the Orchards at Orenco. And Walsh Construction did the work, and I know the architect. And the second phase of that, they said, all right, let's just do bang for the buck, best energy efficiency we can do without spending a lot of money. right? So it came in about 4% over what standard construction costs would be. The utility bills for each one of those units is $14 a month. Significantly more efficient for a 4% bump. And that's given that some of that stuff is specialty items, right? If you buy a triple pane window right now, that's a specialty item. Imagine if the building code said all windows must be triple pane windows. All of a sudden the price in triple pane windows is going to come down.
Yeah, for sure.
So we can dramatically affect all the buildings that are being built now, and there's a lot of building going on now, to make them more efficient. And those will be on the ground for 100 years. So it really matters, right? Then we can go back and start to retrofit some of the existing buildings and make them more efficient. So none of that's sexy, right? But it's a big deal, and it can really drop the greenhouse gas.
And so what do? You give companies incentives, subsidies, tax breaks. Like if they do this, like how do you get it through? How do you process it?
It depends on what thing you're doing, right? Like one of the areas, and this would be straight subsidy, would be to go into low-income housing and start doing those buildings, because those are the crappiest buildings out there. And those people are paying $200 a month for electricity or whatever, because it's just like a sieve.
Yeah.
It's like trying to heat a tent.
Yeah.
For the industrial buildings and some of the bigger commercial buildings, you could do some kind of tax break thing. You could do some kind of incentive program. There's, that's the details that I want to get into conversations with people who have those. And I have, I've been building relationships way beyond what the mayor of Milwaukie should be building for years, because I'm interested in the bigger picture, always have been. So I can sit down with people who do own 100 really large industrial buildings in the state and say, okay, what would it take from the state level to cause you to X?
Yeah.
And
well, what's your opinion then on the fact that there's 50 different rules in the country? Would it be better to abolish state lines and have a federal
building code
for everything?
Well, there is a federal building code. That's the minimum that you can build a building at. And it makes sense for there to be different building codes, because imagine the difference that a building needs to have in, say, Phoenix, Arizona, or Nome, Alaska.
Or in Tulsa, where there's tornadoes. Yeah.
Right. Very different places. You need different standards. You need to be thinking about different things. So you don't want to say there can only be one building code nationwide, because there's geographical differences. But there could be a minimum energy standard for sure. They could, the federal government, and it was interesting. We just tried to do that. All of the cities that are trying to do climate work, which is significant at this point, rallied together, and in the process where the federal building code is voted on, we got the votes to bump the energy code faster, and through some loophole, the powers that be gutted that. I missed the loophole. I'm not in that world, but my building code official was one of the people that voted to increase the building code. Again, billionaires controlling everything.
Mm-hmm. What's your level of optimism when you get up and go to work every day? Like some days are you just like, I'm going to go back to taking photos?
Yeah, absolutely. There are absolutely days where I just am like, I'm done. It's just, we can't fix this. I should just go enjoy life, because it's like, the sinking Titanic, let's throw a party.
Yeah.
But there's other days that, and this probably goes back to, I was a voracious reader as a kid. Well, most of my life until I became mayor, and I haven't read a book since because I have all this other crap I have to read.
Yeah.
Audible saves me.
Mm-hmm.
I get to listen to books occasionally. But I devoured everything that Edgar Rice Burroughs ever wrote. And I don't know if you...
I don't know.
So Tarzan,
okay.
Journey to the Center of the Earth,
okay.
A lot of sort of classic fiction, pulp fiction. But you go back and read that stuff, the language level that was used at that time is so superior to what we currently, even in like literature. Like if you pick up a book today that all the people would say, this is literature. The level of language, the level of
the difference in vocabulary.
Yeah. It is really watered down.
Yeah.
It was funny because I hadn't read that stuff in 40, 50 years. And I sat down with my kid when he was little and started to read him the original Tarzan of the Apes. And I was like, oh my God. Anyway, that was a complete.
That's all right.
It's just something that struck me. But the heroes in his books are always in these situations where it is hopeless. It is utterly hopeless. And the only reason they survive is this tenacity, this willingness to just go, I'm just going to go for it and do what I can do. And they always survive.
Well, yeah.
That's baked into my DNA now.
Whenever I get to that point, I'm like, what else are you going to do?
Right.
You going to give up? Then what? You have to just keep trying.
How could you live with yourself?
Yeah, no, I think that's just part of being a human. I mean, I guess some people give up,
A lot
but
of people have given up. A lot.
I don't know.
That's, I mean, that's the drug addiction thing. They're giving up.
Yeah.
A lot of folks.
Yeah.
Tuning out, Netflix and a bottle of Cabernet,
Sounds like a good night.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't want to think about the world. Just.
Okay. Well, that's a lot of political stuff. Let's go, before we wrap it up, let's go to your career with taking photo and working with National Geographic, because that, not to discredit them now, but 20 years ago and prior, that was a big deal, was it not, to shoot for National Geographic?
Oh yeah, it's so funny. That is one of the most sought after jobs in the world. I mean, you could walk down the street and ask people, "What's your dream job?" And I guarantee you, 1 out of 20 of them will say National Geographic photographer, right? And yet, at any given time, there's like 30 people doing it, maybe 40. They've got more publications now, so maybe it's 100 now, right? And there's no more staffers. Everybody's freelance. So getting that job back then was harder than being an NBA star.
How did that happen for you?
Statistically. Well, I'd said in college, I'm going to shoot for National Geographic. I had friends that reminded me of that wrote, "You did it! Can't believe it." So it was literally my dream coming out of high school to shoot for National Geographic. And I did a couple of things. One, I learned lots of other skills. I became a pretty solid kayaker, whitewater kayaker, whitewater anything, canoe, kayak, raft, whatever. Learned to ice climb, learned to rock climb, I was a scuba diver by the time I was 14. I was the youngest certified scuba diver in the state of Colorado.
Wow.
All those kinds of skills, camping, backpacking, trekking, just all the things. So that there was virtually not an assignment I could be sent on that I wasn't physically prepared for. So that was one piece. And then that was everything I lived for. I spent the money I would make at a job on Kodachrome, and I would go out and shoot.
Yeah, because you were shooting film, right? Which is a way different beast than shooting digital photos in your iPhone.
You actually have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because you don't get to go, "Oh yeah, I didn't get that one."
Yeah. Well, and the thing you can't really teach people, in my opinion, is composition.
Yeah.
The way that you frame something in the photo is so important. And so many people don't understand that. That
and seeing light.
Yeah.
That's another thing that most people don't do well. Yeah. So I suppose I credit that to the hundreds of hours as a kid. My folks had a storeroom, and they had all the old issues of National Geographic and Life magazine and Look in boxes. And I just used to sit down there for hours and hours.
You could tell that that's what you wanted to do, is take photos that would get published. As a kid, you knew that.
I don't know that I knew then that that's what I wanted to do. I was just fascinated by those. I don't think there was like a ulterior, I'm getting ready to do this. I was just personally fascinated by those, by seeing the world through a really well-trained eye. And so I had that going on. I actually wanted, when I was a freshman in high school, I wanted to be a marine biologist. And then I had a really crappy biology teacher and
ruined it for you.
Yeah, kind of. That, and I went to Brooks Institute one summer. My folks went out to San Diego for a vacation, and I talked them into taking me to Brooks, which was like the end-all, be-all, marine biology school. And I got to talk to a couple of the biologists, and I was like, well, "What was the last place you dove?" Or like that, kid. And they're like, "Oh God, I haven't been diving in decades. No, all my work's in the laboratory." And I was like, "Ew."
Sounds terrible.
I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau, right?
Yeah.
That was my thing. He was one of my heroes growing up. I had his whole encyclopedia, all that stuff. So when that one went out the window, I was like, okay, how do I do that life? How do I do all the things I want to do and get paid for it? And photographer was the answer.
It's pretty cool you were around in that time frame, because I don't think people get paid to take photos anymore.
There are still some people that get paid to take photos, but it becomes really obvious when you sit down with a magazine today and a magazine from 20 years ago that not enough people are getting paid to take pictures.
Yeah.
Geographic still got pretty high standards, but I'd say even I will look through issues sometimes and I'll just go, there's not one picture in there that blew my mind. And that's not normal. 20 years ago, I wouldn't have said that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they have a competition every year, right? Where somebody wins best photo of the year, National Geographic. Don't they do something like that?
They do a thing where readers can send in photos, and then every month they publish one of those photos. But I don't think they do.
No. Choosing one of the staffers who took the photo. They don't do that?
I don't think they. No.
Oh, okay.
That I'm aware of.
So when you were doing that for them, was it full time? Like, were they paying you a salary?
No, I was contract. So I had a particular contract, and just would get assignments and go for a month to Australia and shoot whatever.
They would was it email or was it like a letter in the mail?
Email.
They would send you an email and say, we need you to go to the outback and shoot some tarantulas.
There were also phone calls involved, generally speaking. But yeah, and that's just the initial, hey, Mark, are you available in January to go do this thing? And then, we'd start talking about it, and I would talk to the writer, and, we would figure out what we needed to do.
And you would purchase tickets and all that kind of stuff and then just ask for reimbursements, or what?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. That's a commercial photographer. So I did editorial, which is, National Geographic. I shot a lot for Sports Illustrated. I shot for Outside. I shot for Men's Journal and lots of magazines. But so that was one half of my business, and you don't make a living doing that.
Yeah.
Half of the business, because editorial typically paid back then around $300 a day, which seems like decent money. But considering I had over $100,000 worth of camera equipment, I had to insure that camera equipment, I had to have employees do things. It was not, you couldn't make a living on that. What you made a living on was the commercial work, doing advertising work. So I shot from, Adidas, Salem cigarettes. There were some times I sold my soul. I'll admit it. But a lot of Jeep, UPS, a lot of different companies I did ads for, and that paid really well.
Yeah.
That paid, from $5,000 to $10,000 a day, just fees. That's not any of the expenses.
Yeah.
So so I always tried to keep a good mix of that, but almost coincidentally, as I was really ramping up with National Geographic, was also at the beginning of the last downturn. when it actually started to occur, not when everyone else kind of noticed it. When everyone else noticed it was when the housing bubble broke.
You're talking about 2007? Yeah.
Yeah, but it started happening sooner than that. I used to be able to tell you the date because you could see it in magazines. You'd go to the library and look at magazines and go, oh, wow, they got skinnier. Why'd they get skinnier? Less ads. If less ads, less content. They literally, I mean, you can go and you just see, wow, that's when the economy started to tank.
Because the companies didn't have the money to advertise?
They felt like a downturn was coming and they were reeling in. And for a lot of companies, they think advertising is almost like hedging their bets. Like they kind of don't really believe in it to some degree.
I always assumed they thought that was the most important part.
Shelf space in the grocery store is probably more important to them than the ad. But yeah, I mean, clearly, like Nike became Nike because of Wyden Kennedy.
Yeah.
It would not have done what it's done.
Yeah.
Had Wyden Kennedy not done the phenomenal job they did. So advertising actually is very powerful. But there's a lot of industries that don't believe that, that don't really think that that's the case. And maybe for them it's not, you know. If there's only 3 diaper companies and everybody's got to buy diapers,
yeah, how
important is it?
Yeah.
Really? It's probably more important that you have more shelf space in the grocery store.
I see.
And so whatever you got to do that. So
what was the most rewarding then between all those magazines where you were not getting paid well, but getting to go cool places or meet with cool people? What was the best part about National Geographic or Sports Illustrated?
Those were my 2. I got to do some of the coolest assignments with those 2. Probably more with National Geographic than SI, but one of my favorites is still an SI assignment. Got to go dive with hammerhead sharks off of there's islands off of Costa Rica called the Cocos Islands. It's like 300 miles off the coast. It's like the opening scene of the very first Jurassic Park when they're flying into those islands.
Yeah.
That's the Cocos Islands.
Okay.
So it's very remote. It takes a day and a half on a boat to get out there. So then you spend 10 days living on a boat out there and you dive. And it's just unbelievable, or was. I don't know what it's like anymore. But 20 years ago, just hundreds and hundreds of hammerhead sharks, schools of them, you know, and huge schools of barracudas and schools of tuna would come through. And
were you ever worried about getting your arm bit off or anything?
No, I mean, there's certain situations, and I was in one on one of my assignments for Geographic in Southern Australia, but really we're not on the menu for sharks. When people get bit by a shark, that's usually a shark making a mistake. Surfers get bit a lot because from below, the surfer, the sort of the silhouette of a surfer is similar to the silhouette of a sea lion. And typically you don't see people getting consumed by the shark. They get bit. Yeah. And then the shark goes blah, spits them out, and then they die because, you know, they lost a leg. Yeah. They bleed to death. But you're not really on the menu. And scuba divers in particular, actually the hardest part about that assignment was trying to get a really nice close shot of a hammerhead shark and a diver, because the bubbles that you're emitting scare the sharks. So the closest I could kind of get was maybe 20 feet. And when you're shooting underwater, you shoot with really, really wide lenses, because even in really clear water, there's stuff in the water. So if you're trying to shoot something that's, 100 feet away and using a telephoto lens, for example, it just look really soft, really crappy. Mm-hmm. So you try and be really close and shoot with really wide lenses. So, I actually ended up going down twice, poor me, to do this trip in Costa Rica. And the only reason that worked out is because the rider had to bail the first time. Something happened with a baseball team or something, and he had to go cover that. So when they decided to send the rider, I was like, well, don't you think you need pictures of Swifty diving with the sharks? And they're like, oh, yeah, we probably do. So you should go back. And the reason besides the fact to get to dive 10 more days, I had figured out the first time how I had to do it. And how I had to do it was I needed to go down there with just one other diver, because usually everybody goes at once.
Yeah.
So you got 30 people in the water, all,
Yeah, that's too many.
monkey fish, right? And the sharks stay away. So I managed to do one dive where I went down with just one of the guides, one of the dive masters, and we got the shot that became the shot from that thing. And it was, this hammerhead is probably 5 feet away from me, swimming right at me, and Jose was kind of just right up over its shoulder, smaller. It was a cool shot. But that was an awesome trip.
Well, and I imagine with film, I never really shot film. I didn't start until it was digital, and then, with iPhones. But you can tell what it looks like right after because you can see it. But with film, you're probably just shooting, 500, 1,000 photos a day. You have no idea what you have until you go develop, right?
Oh, if you're lucky. Think about underwater photography, all right? 36 shots. You have 36 shots in your camera. You can't change film underwater.
Yeah.
Right? So the hardcore guys, like David Dublé, they had these, like almost a raft that they would lower down, and it would have 6 or 8 cameras on it. And then he would just work an area and just change out the cameras. And he had assistants ferrying stuff back and forth. And then he would have to do a decompression dive. You'd have to sit at different levels, and people were bringing him tanks down. Because a lot of the stuff what was happening with at the Cocos, we were at 100, 120 feet. You can only stay there for like 8-10 minutes. And then you have to start getting into much shallower water. Otherwise, you're going to have to do a decompression dive, and people are going to have to bring you tanks. So I never had that luxury of having multiple cameras. So every dive that I shot, I was like 36 pictures. Sometimes I took 2 cameras. I had my little Nikonos, and I had the big housed Nikon. You
had to really make sure you wanted to take that photo.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you had to know all the things had to be right? Your exposure, how much flash you were putting out, the direction of the flash, all the things had to be just perfect.
Yeah, because there wasn't enough light 120 feet down, right?
No.
Is it basically black?
It's pretty dark. Now, some of the modern digital cameras, you could shoot underwater.
Yeah.
But the difference is, and it's not just the amount of light, it's the color of the light. So when you get down to about 15 feet, and I'm going to blow this again, but you lose like the red spectrum. And then at 30 feet, you lose the orange spectrum. And you just start to lose portions of the spectrum of light. So when you get down at 120 feet, it's basically blue and green. That's it. That's the colors.
So did you have to color your flash?
No, because the flash isn't traveling. That light from the flash is not traveling 120 feet through water. It's traveling 3 feet out from my camera and 3 feet back to right from the flash back. So 6 feet. So, and the further away you got, the bluer it got. But you're taking basically sunlight down to the ocean floor with the flash.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So that was definitely the most challenging then. I mean, all the stuff you shot on the surface was much easier, I'm sure. Because I saw some stuff on your website. Looked like you had been to Africa. Am I wrong?
I was in Africa, never on assignment, sadly.
Okay.
No, the only time I was in Africa, I was actually still a high school kid, or had just graduated high school. I was shooting a lot by then, but I had shot both of my high school yearbooks, junior and senior year. Was the photo editor for the paper, all that kind of stuff. So I was a decent photographer by the time I was graduating from high school. But yeah, I'm trying to remember what's from Africa on my.
Maybe I'm confusing it with something else. I went through and you got some really nice stuff on there. We'll put the link in with the episode so people can go check it out. But yeah, you've got some.
Make
really
sure
good
you got
stuff.
the right link. I had to change that because I put my political site is now at markgamba.com, which has been my website forever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when I Google Mark Gamba photographer, it still wants to point you to markgamba.com.
Well, I think the one with the photos was Mark Gamba photo.
Yeah, we had to create that so we could do the political thing.
Yeah, cool.
Anyway.
Very cool. Well, I think that's a good spot. I appreciate you coming down and talking with me. I could do another 5 or 6 hours with you, but I know you got stuff to do. So thank you.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you.
Cool.